Rain streaked the glass walls of the office as if the sky itself mourned. Alexander Volkov, CEO of Volkov Enterprises, sat behind his mahogany desk, unmoved by the storm or the world outside. The city below glimmered with cold ambition, much like the man who ruled it. His assistants had learned long ago that his silence was not emptiness, it was calculation. Every movement of his hand, every glance, had purpose. That morning, a folder lay unopened before him. It was from the charity division, something about a children's hospice seeking sponsorship. He had almost tossed it aside, as he always did with such distractions. Business had no place for sentiment. Profit margins did not respond to tears. Yet for some reason, his hand hesitated. The photo clipped to the file caught his attention. A girl with enormous brown eyes and a shy smile, holding a stuffed rabbit that looked more stitches than fabric. Her name was Lena, age 7, diagnosis, terminal leukemia. The letter beneath the photo, written in uneven childish scrawl, was simple. Dear Mr. Volkov, my wish is to meet you. They say you're very busy, but my nurse says sometimes people need a reason to smile. I want to give you mine. Lena. For a moment, Alexander simply stared at the words. It was absurd. A dying child wanted to meet him. Why? He was not a movie star or a hero. He built skyscrapers, bought out competitors, and broke deals with the same precision a surgeon used on bone. He had no time for this. And yet something in that crooked handwriting, something innocent and unspoiled, pulled at the corner of his guarded mind. It had been years since anyone had written to him by hand. Years since anyone had wanted to meet him. Not his title, not his money, but him. Outside, thunder rolled through the skyline. He closed the folder, meaning to forget it, but found himself slipping it into his briefcase instead. He told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. But as he left the office that night, the girl's smile lingered behind his eyes like a whisper from another life. The hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic and soft soap. Alexander walked its corridors like an intruder in a foreign land. His tailored suit and polished shoes looked out of place among the pale walls and colorful drawings taped to the doors. Children laughed somewhere down the hall, a fragile, high-pitched sound that made him strangely uneasy. A young nurse approached him, her eyes widening when she recognized who he was. Mr. Volkov, thank you for coming. Lena's been talking about this all week. She's very excited. He nodded curtly, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. I won't stay long, he said, though even to his own ears, the words sounded defensive. When he entered the room, sunlight filtered through thin curtains, laying warm stripes across a small bed covered in pink blankets. The girl from the photo looked even smaller in person. Her hair had mostly fallen out, leaving a few golden wisps around her face. But her smile, that same bright, stubborn smile, lit up the sterile room like dawn. Mr. Volkov, she asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit. You came. He hesitated, then gave a stiff nod. I did. You wrote me a letter. Lena giggled, her eyes shining. I didn't think you'd answer. Mama says important people don't have time for wishes. Something in that sentence hit him harder than expected. Your mother is wise, he said, sitting awkwardly in the chair beside her bed. She's in heaven now, the girl said simply, looking down at her rabbit. But I think she would have liked you. Alexander froze. He didn't know how to respond. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, yet this frail child's words left him wordless. Lena noticed his discomfort and tilted her head. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy? The question was so innocent, yet it pierced like glass. He almost laughed, a bitter, humorless sound, but stopped himself. He thought of his penthouse apartment, the silence of his office, the cold gleam of his empire. I suppose I am, he lied. Lena smiled knowingly. You don't look it. And in that instant, Alexander Volkov, man of iron and success, felt something stir inside him for the first time in years. Shame, sorrow, and an unfamiliar longing for something he couldn't name. Days turned into weeks, and though Alexander had meant to visit only once, he found himself returning again and again. His driver no longer needed instructions. The black car simply arrived at the hospital every Friday afternoon. His assistants whispered behind closed doors about their cold CEO spending time with a dying child, but Alexander didn't care to explain. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to justify anything. Lena's room had changed since his first visit. Paper cranes hung from the ceiling. Her drawings, bright suns, green fields, stick figures holding hands, covered the walls. She always had something to show him. Sometimes it was a new picture. Sometimes it was just a story she'd made up. "Today I drew us," she said one afternoon, holding out a piece of paper. "You're the tall one with the grumpy eyebrows." He laughed. A real, unguarded laugh that startled even him. "Grumpy eyebrows," she nodded solemnly. "But you're smiling too. That's how I know you're getting better." He raised an eyebrow. "Better? I'm not sick." "Yes, you are," she said softly. "Just not the kind doctors can fix." Her words struck him in a way no boardroom confrontation ever had. For a moment, he couldn't meet her gaze. He'd spent years hiding behind numbers and contracts, avoiding anything that reminded him of loss or love. But Lena saw through him effortlessly, as if his success and power were nothing more than glass. "Tell me something, Lena," he said after a pause. "If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?" She smiled dreamily. "To see the ocean. Mama always wanted to take me, but we never got the chance." He looked at her small hands clutching the rabbit, at the IV line taped to her arm, and felt something twist painfully inside. For the first time, Alexander Volkov, the man who could buy anything, realized there were things beyond his reach. That evening, as he left the hospital, the city lights seemed different. They no longer looked like triumph. They looked hollow, distant, reflections of a life built on everything except what mattered. And by the time he reached his car, he had already made a decision. If Lena's dream was to see the ocean, then somehow, he would make it happen. 2 weeks later, Alexander kept his promise. A private medical team arranged everything: the oxygen tanks, the portable monitors, the doctor's quiet supervision. He had rented a small cottage by the sea, far from cameras and crowds. The air smelled of salt and blooming lilac. For Lena, it was a dream made real. She stood at the edge of the shore, bundled in a soft blanket, her rabbit tucked under one arm. The wind tangled what was left of her golden hair, and she laughed as a wave splashed against her feet. Alexander watched from a few steps away, his shoes sinking into the wet sand, his heart unsteady. "It's bigger than I imagined," she whispered. "It goes on forever." He knelt beside her, his gaze following the endless horizon. "Yes, it does." For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of waves filled the silence between them, carrying something sacred. Then Lena looked up at him, her eyes clear but faintly dimmed by exhaustion. "Mr. Volkov," she said, "can I tell you my real wish now?" He turned to her slowly. "Real wish," she nodded. "I didn't want to meet a CEO. I wanted to meet the man who could learn to smile again." His throat tightened. "Lena, promise me," she whispered, her voice trembling like the sea breeze. "When I'm gone, you won't forget to be kind. You'll find someone who needs a smile too." He wanted to speak, to promise her anything, but the words caught behind the ache in his chest. Instead, he took her tiny hand in his, warm, fragile, fading. They sat there for hours, watching the sun descend into gold and fire. When the last light touched the water, Lena leaned her head against his arm. "It's so beautiful," she murmured. "Mama must be watching." And then she closed her eyes. The waves kept coming, slow and gentle, as the doctor quietly stepped forward. But Alexander didn't move. He sat frozen, holding her hand long after it had gone still, staring at the ocean that stretched beyond sight. In the weeks that followed, people noticed the change. The ruthless CEO began funding children's hospitals, visiting shelters, smiling at strangers. Yet he never spoke of Lena. Her drawing, 2 figures by the sea, one tall, one small, hung framed in his office. Beneath it, her final words were written in a child's uneven scrawl: "Don't forget to smile."